Hello and welcome to another 5 Minutes with Sean, maybe 10 sit-down edition. Happens to be another beautiful Mental Health Monday as we wrap up the month of August already. It's quite insane to me where the summer has gone as the fall potentially is on its way. So look, guys, we've talked about a lot of Mental Health Mondays. I told you at the beginning of the year I was going to commit myself to featuring someone or something related to mental health every single month of the year. And we're going to continue this forever. We think it's that important. We're going to continue to do it. It's gotten great response. And so today's guest is someone who I followed for quite a while, has a really cool message, very much into music. I love just listening and watching Jeff talk about things as he goes about his life. But if you don't know Jeff Johnston, then you're going to learn about him, and you're going to learn why I find him to be a wonderful person to listen to, but also someone who embodies strength in the fact of the matter that when life gives you the most difficult of turns, and I'm seriously telling you guys, I don't know that I've ever told a story like this on my show ever before, that when it's over and you hear it, the next time you think that you have hit rock bottom or you think your life is just so bad, I want you to take 13 seconds and remember what we're going to talk about here today, because it's that changing. So without further ado, we bring on Jeff Johnston. Jeff, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Sean. It's an honor to be on the show, and I am super excited to talk on Mental Health Monday. And I'm sure you know this, but the end of this month on the 31st is International Overdose Awareness Day. So that's another important day. Obviously, when you hear my story, that hits home and very personal to me.
I did not know that, and I appreciate you telling me that. So August the 31st, and again, yes, we will get into it. So Jeff, I've been watching you a while on LinkedIn. You speak about your life, right? The undeterred life, the way that you move through things. And it really started with initially, I believe, around what had happened with your son. Why don't you sort of jump into the audience, give us a little background, and start to tell us your story, man?
Yeah, I'll do a little reverse engineering here and go back 5 or 6, 7 years. I'm currently 55 years old. I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. At the age of 23, I started a wealth management company right out of college, and I grew that company up to, a nice small company, small business in the Midwest. Currently, we employ 9 financial advisors in our firm, and we have 7 full-time staff. So I'm an investment manager by trade. I don't work anymore in that industry. As you're going to see, my life took a detour that I kind of lost that passion to talk about money with people. Now I talk about more important things than money. But I got married 21 years ago to my lovely wife, Prudence. And we have 3 boys, Seth, Ian, and Roman. And at age 50, I was on top of the summit of my personal life. I had reached every objective and goal that I aspired to have. I was coaching my boys. I was running a very successful financial practice, married to an absolutely stunning, beautiful, independent rock star woman, 9 years younger than me. Financially set. I mean, good health. I had the lottery, man. I was really in a good place. And then on October 4th, 2016, I got the call that every parent just absolutely dreads, and it's the worst call you can possibly get. They found our 23-year-old son, Seth, dead in a hotel room, overdosed, heroin laced with fentanyl. And that day, I became a better man, not a bitter man. And I mean that sincerely, Sean. This didn't happen overnight. And that's something I want your listeners and followers and people that subscribe to you. This didn't happen overnight. I didn't just all of a sudden turn into, Superman, living undeterred Jeff. I went straight downhill into a place I call the abyss. And I write about this frequently. I write about it in my book. I have a blog on my Living Undeterred website.
Yeah, you posted something recently that
Yeah, I did.
I had delved into the story on quickly. I don't want you to lose
Yeah.
thought, but I
Yep.
also want to come back to something. When you're referencing that it didn't happen overnight, the phrase that you just gave me, that it made you a better man as opposed to a bitter man.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking that transformation didn't happen overnight because initially you were a bitter man?
Bitter. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what you're saying,
right.
you
Yep.
started down the abyss
Right.
bitterness train and then became a better man.
Yeah. And see what happened was up to that point, Sean, at age 50, I was wearing a mask like most of us do. I had the underlying some marital issues. I mean, we weren't going to be divorced or anything, but we had our marital issues after being married so many years. Our oldest son had an addiction problem. He was prescribed Adderall at 15, and that went into his drinking, his marijuana use, cocaine, prison, and then he died by heroin. So there was an 8-year journey there, train wreck, I think I should call it, my book, where that was kind of kept secret away from the public. So, and I was an alcoholic, and also I was a compulsive gambler in my 30s. I had a massive, I was a financial advisor. That's not something to put on your resume. But it never interfered with my career. I made a lot of money. I also spent a lot of money, and it was my money to do what I want with. But I gambled a lot and I drank a lot. So I had a lot of underlying issues that the public didn't know about Jeff Johnston. And then my son dies and the mask was revealed. And for probably 8 to 10 months, I went straight downhill to the point where I talk about this in a recent blog that I let's just say I knew it took me 7.5 seconds to get my Beretta out of my safe. I'll leave it at that. 7.5 seconds. That's all it took me to get my Beretta out of my safe to end my life. And that thought entertained my mind, or poisoned my mind, I guess is a better word, more than one occasion. But fortunately, I had the foresight to not do that. And you'll see why, that I'm very grateful that I had the strength not to succumb to that. So I quit drinking on December 24th, 2017. I just decided, Sean, I was tired. I was tired of being tired. And I also quit to support my wife because we both were drinking way too much at that point. Quitting alcohol was the easiest thing I've ever done in my entire life. I don't even call myself sober because that implies I'm in a struggle. And I am in no struggle. I have won. I don't think about it. I have a bottle of Camus next to my bed. I like to look at it, to laugh at it, to mock it. At dinner, I'll order drinks by myself, put it in front of me, and wait for the waitstaff to say, was there something wrong with your drink? And I say, no, I don't drink alcohol. And I do this as a little game because I'm not that smart. So I have to trick my brain to believe I'm not an alcoholic. And I simply just choose not to drink. So I meditate heavily. There's all these things I do that get me into really being aware of my thoughts. And that's one of my themes I'd like to talk about today about coping mechanisms, is the awareness, the ability to know where your thoughts are heading and to stop them from getting destructive. All this I learned post Seth's death. So I was just like every other normal, white-blooded, red-blooded American male. I had all the anger issues. I was an alcoholic. I gambled, all those things. But I really learned I re-evolved myself into this new Jeff Johnston after Seth died. So what happened, Sean, after that, though, my wife and I kind of went separate directions. She took grieving on a different road, and I took grieving on my own road. Matter of fact, the road analogy is so important to me. It's a chapter in my book called The Two Roads. And the day Seth died, Sean, I sat my two boys down and I said, it's a long story. I'll keep it short. But I said, boys, we have two roads to go down. We have one road of anger, despair, and hatred, and we'll become alcoholics and addicts ourselves. Or we have a road of inspiration and motivation. And this can be the single greatest influence in our life and the lives of others for the rest of our life. I'm on the second road. I ask you boys to join me. And the reason why that's important narrative, Sean, is I didn't tell my sons how to grieve. I was going to show them how to grieve. I think too many parents tell their kids what not to do and how to do and what to do. Don't drink. And then they get drunk every night in front of their kids at home. And I think, the best thing we can do as parents is to be that role model that we say that we want our kids to grow up to be. We have to be that person as well. So that's why quitting drinking has been arguably the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. as a full-blown raging alcoholic. But again, is that because I'm strong, or is that because I've just learned ways to trick my brain? I don't really know.
I don't think it really matters.
Right.
I don't think of it, that's your way forward. That's your way forward. You know what I mean? Like my dad, I used to joke with my dad, my dad would go celebrate sobriety in Vegas every year. And I was always like, what are you doing? Like, why are you going? And he was like, for what? It's who cares? It doesn't matter.
I love it.
Let it be everywhere because I'm not interested in it, But in that case, my dad was going there to gamble. So it's like this whole, if you're just going to exchange vices, then you exchange vices. Like I get that.
Right.
So you talk about there were obvious signs with your son, right?
Yeah.
There were obvious things along the way. You call it a terrible, dreadful journey along the way, as trying to find and help and do all those things. So as a parent, what were the discussions you and your wife were having and then having with him as things? What were the discussions you guys were talking about with him? Like, hey, stop doing this. Like you were just saying, was it more of a telling him what to do, or is it more of a, hey, let's show him and work with him, but we're back here drinking as well? So like, how did you view those discussions?
In hindsight, I probably missed a lot because I had two other boys. I'm coaching, I'm active, running my business. And now when I look back and kind of relive the moments of when this unfolded right in front of my eyes, because 8 years felt like, 8 days sometimes. Now I see where there were signs that I probably should have been more aware of. But, at the end of the day, when I go back and look at what happened, part of me wants to avoid the painful moments and then learn from those moments as well. So when I go forward, I don't repeat them. But the conversations we had were like we have with all of our kids, I remember one time on my couch when Seth did cocaine at a party when my wife and I were overseas. He was 16 or 17. I've never even seen cocaine. So to me, this was just a whole world that I couldn't relate to. I said, Seth, you're going to be in prison. You're going to be dead. Well, I was right on both counts. He was incarcerated numerous times, and then he ended up dying. But could we have prevented it? I don't know. If people aren't willing or able to see the destructive path they're on, the most helpless feeling in the world is trying to change someone else's behavior when the outcome is a certain outcome, but you can't do it. It is so the collateral damage, Sean, and you probably know this. The collateral damage is just, it's unbelievable. I think the person involved in the middle of this understands, but I don't think they do.
Correct.
And it's not just as easy as, just quit, like Jeff Johnston did drinking. It's not that simple for some people. My son Seth probably had many undiagnosed mental illness issues that was the umbrella over all his alcoholism, all his addiction issues, ADD, everything he had. I just think I missed the boat in trying to figure out where the mental health problem was. And that's my life lesson as a dad going forward now, that I can teach people as parents to, some doctor says your kid has ADD, hug your kid and tell them that's a goddamn superpower. Sorry, I swore, but tell them, I have ADD. I can see you rocking in your chair, Sean. You have ADD too. It's like, it's a great thing to have. It's a great thing to have. And too many people are labeled these things as curses, like they're going to be werewolves at midnight or something. And my son took his ADD as a death warrant. He took it as a curse. Yeah,
my parents, that was something, my brother and I, when we were younger, it was a similar discussion. It was like, hey, your kids need Ritalin. Your kids need to just be able to sit in the corner and they're too much of this. And my mom was like, no, I don't think this is the right school. I think we'll just get them out of here type thing. And my brother actually ended up going up a grade. So like, there's a whole thing with all that, right? But here's the thing. And I know it gets talked about a lot, but you pretty much just said it, which is something that I struggle with in discussion with people. And that is that you said that you were trying to basically help figure out the addiction part because it was all new to you, the drugs, the this and that. But the reality was that you needed to address the mental health.
Right.
The addictions were byproducts of the mental health. And so often I get some negative mail. I'm pretty open about some of the things I do in my life. And I have vices, but they're all managed to my extent. They're all managed the way I use your line, and my dad says it's the line of a great addict, which is they don't interfere with my life. I use them the way I want to use them, and that's how I use them.
Right.
My dad can't do that. My dad doesn't have, if he had a sip of beer, he needs to have 40 beers.
Understand.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
The middle level
Yep.
just doesn't make sense to him.
Right.
It
Right.
does to me. And that's
Right.
okay. Addiction is mental health becomes before addiction, I guess, is what I've learned from all of this. And so, Jeff, when you deal with it now, when you talk to your boys now, is there a bigger focus, obviously, in your life around mental health and a discussion with them? Is it vastly different than it was previous to what happened with Seth?
There's no question. Everything you said, I'm on par with, because to me it's about choices, and that's why my nonprofit's called the Choices Network. I designed my nonprofit not to be sober living network or I don't drink something. It's like, it was choices. It's all about choices. I'm not anti-alcohol. That's what people need to understand. I don't smoke pot, but I'm not anti-marijuana. I'm not anti much. It's about choices. If you choose to drink and get behind the wheel, then the consequences, the choices always precede consequences. So, I think that's the thing about parents, is that we get into too much preaching and not enough teaching them how to choose right, make better decisions.
That's what I was saying. With that discussion with Seth that you were talking about, you referenced on the couch, where you said, "Hey, man, jail."
Right.
What was? Do you remember his response, or do you remember when you would ask those things, what he would say to you? Was it a cavalier 20-year-old? I don't care, not going to happen.
Yeah. It was cavalier. It was more, I get it, Dad. I get it. And Seth was never violent. We never had any problems with that. Again, this is the book right here that I wrote. It's called This One's For You, An Inspirational Journey Through Addiction, Death, and Meaning. And I took a year of my life. It's a great, uplifting, inspirational story, but I don't start off that way. I get right into basically the day he died. And I talk about all these things, Sean, and I try to turn this into something where it's a guide for parents, that when the age of first use in the United States is 14 years old, and you have to really think about that. That's 7th or 8th freaking grade, man. That's pretty damn young. And if you're a parent out there and you think that your 12 and 13-year-old isn't that kid, or not my kid, well, there's a reason why 200 kids or 200 people are dying a day of just alone opioid overdoses in the United States. And there are plenty of kids that are not. As a matter of fact, Patrick Moore is somebody you should probably talk to. He has a book called Prehab.
Patrick's been on the show. Patrick was one of our first Mental Health Mondays.
Awesome.
Patrick worried. That's the only guy I've ever worried about having on my show in my life, because his concepts, his mind, like I know that I see of him, I'm just like, dude, if I have this guy on my show, I'm gonna freak out. Like, I'm not gonna be able to keep up. I had to read his book 3 times. Look at all the notes I have. But that's where I get the reference before of the mental health preceding the idea of this. And that's why it bothers me. So let me ask you, if you don't mind answering.
No, go ahead.
Seth, you said, was incarcerated. Was he incarcerated for drugs?
Well, actually, he got incarcerated. Ironically, he was in jail for drunk drivings. He was in jail for break and entries. All this is documented in my book, but his actual reason he got incarcerated, I avoided in the book to talk about, but I'm fine with it now. Basically, he was in a situation with a girl that ends up being, right now, Seth has a child. I don't talk about this in the book. His girlfriend was pregnant when he died. So I have a granddaughter.
Wow.
Yeah. And I tell you what,
wow.
I am so lucky. I am so lucky to have her in my life. She's 5 and I pick her up tomorrow. I have her for the weekend. I absolutely love her. Her name's Brighton. I always tell her, I say, Brighton, you brighten my day, but anyway.
But Jeff, that's amazing. That's an amazing part of the story. I'm shocked. I'm sorry that you've.
No, he never met her, man. I mean, it's just.
No, I know, but for you, like, to have that sort of peace after the fact of something so. That's very unique, man. That is something that is. I don't know if you're trying to keep it private. I apologize if we blew this up. No. You haven't been on to talk about, but dude, that's some serious sort of, symbiotic life shit right there. I don't know. It's heavy.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
That gives me goosebumps. I'm all screwed up over that because that's life into replacement of life thing with me, and I get all it's very.
When I see her,
amazing.
I just get just feelings I've never had in my life. It's like, it's one thing having a grandchild or even your own child, but having one that, and she's 5 and the mom is lost custody and she's not in a good place, and the dad is dead and she's 5, and it's like, my parents are 88 and still alive, and
Yeah.
so it's like you talked about comparison. I mean, imagine this 5-year-old growing up and going to birthday parties and going, where's my daddy, but here's the deal, Sean, I wrote the book knowing that someday she's going to ask about her dad. And I want to make sure that she knows her dad wasn't just a felon, wasn't just an alcoholic, wasn't just died from heroin. Her dad was a really good basketball player. He was a great guitarist. He was a freaking funny kid, and, anyway, he was incarcerated in an incident that he was with the mom, and there was a fight over with another guy, and he ended up stabbing him, and the guy went to jail, or Seth went to prison, and I was on vacation with my wife, and my son was in prison, and I used to visit him all the time in jail. And by the way, none of his other friends, none of his drug friends showed up. I always say, "Where's your friend, Seth?" But dad's here, dad's here. That's what dads do,
And when was that, Jeff, in this journey? When was that major incarceration?
60 days before he died.
Got
And I was just gonna tell you, when my lawyer called me and said, "Hey, Jeff, I got great news. I got Seth out of prison." I turned to my wife. I said, "This isn't good news." And within 2 months, he was dead.
And why wasn't it good news, Jeff? Because he hadn't learned a lesson. He hadn't cleaned up. He hadn't dried out. What?
No. He had earned a lesson. He had dried up. All that. He just, the pull to the addiction world and the substance abuse world was so strong. And within a couple of months, he was already back into the same circle of friends. And he met a girl that was into heroin. And he didn't try to die. He didn't. It's not like the drug dealers test the heroin and say, "Well, there's too much fentanyl in this. Let's take it out." It's like, it's just Russian roulette. That's why I try to tell kids today, anything you do, marijuana can have fentanyl in it. Xanax could have fentanyl in it. Anything you take right now to get high can have fentanyl in it. And fentanyl, when you and I were young, I'm 55, we got drunk, we passed out, we hit our head, maybe we fell down, our friends took it, made fun of us, but none of us ever freaking died. Nothing was ever laced with shit that can kill you like it is today. It's a whole different game today for kids. And as Patrick Moore alludes to, it's the low risk kids that end up dying.
Well, it's because it doesn't matter if it's your first time or your 40th time in those positions. That could have been tragically more so, Jeff. It could have been Seth's first time, and there have been no signs of it.
Yep. And that's where these arrogant parents are like, "Well, not my son." Well, how about your son, who's the 4-point all-state football player, tries a joint at one frickin' party his senior year, and that one joint has fentanyl in it, lights out. Awesome. I think people got to get past this "not my kid" crap.
Well, yeah, but I also, if we're going to go down this road, to be fair, again, not a parent, so don't want to speak on parenting behavior, but on the drug behavior of this country. We don't do everything being illegal makes it impossible to test or track. So you don't do it with alcohol. You don't do it with cigarettes. There's a whole way to go about this. Oh, you have countries in Europe that have completely legal drugs. Go to Madrid, anything you want. Like so we just don't do a good enough job of giving people the right avenue. They're going to use drugs. They're going to drink alcohol. They're going to use prostitution. This shit's all going to happen. So let's regulate it. Let's be right about it. Maybe we would have saved your kid's life if it was regulated.
I mean, we give condoms to them not to have children, but we know they're going to have sex.
Right, but all we want them to do is have children and create this cycle that exists of the pressure of being a 15-year-old. It's like, well, here's a condom for now, but when you get old enough, you better have 2.5 kids, and you better do this. Right. It's not fair, man.
It's insane. The war on drugs has been a colossal failure, and this is coming from a guy that's never done drugs. I mean, I've smoked pot twice in my life. I've never done drugs.
This is coming from a guy who's done most drugs and is still here to talk about it, because at the end of the day, it's about how you use things in your life.
Right.
I'm 40 years old. I've learned a lot of lessons. I'm probably fortunate to be here. Okay. I had a terrible drinking problem. My wife saved my life. Single-handedly, one person took another person out of the abyss, and it was dark and it was disgusting, and it was part of my lineage. My dad, his dad, booze hounds down the road, and she stopped it. And it was just because of her care, her want. And you're right. If I didn't care to change, she'd have left, and I'd have been left by myself. But like you alluded to, it's all in the person who's in it. Do they want it bad enough? And I think that's why, I think that's another reason potentially you were concerned about Seth's release, is because you knew he didn't want a different life bad enough. And that as soon as he hit the open road, he would just fall back in the same habits. So
he looked really good when he got out of prison. But what I was going to kind of, I don't know how much time we have left.
Don't worry about that.
I did want to make sure that I added the other opportunity or challenge I had. I frequently say in a lot of my presentations that the greatest teacher we have is death, and that death really teaches us everything. And if we can't learn from death, then we end up becoming death ourselves. And that is something I don't have time for. So 8 weeks ago, my wife died. So, I've dealt with in 4.5 years, the death of my oldest son to heroin, and the death of my wife of 21 years, who I love dearly. And I think at this juncture, I will refrain from the cause of death. But let me tell you this, Sean, grief did her no favor. You can kind of figure out, read between the lines. That her cause of death was the result of, obviously she died when Seth died. I'll say that.
Yeah. And so you brought up, you bring up prudence, you bring up that situation. Yep. But I want to go back to where kind of reverse a little bit here about the two roads.
Yeah.
And you had clearly selected yours. Yeah. And Prudence selected hers. It doesn't sound like hers and your roads ever intersected again.
No, they didn't. And it was again, it's hard to say, because everybody just deals with things so separately, so differently. And being a man versus a woman, all these different ways that we she birthed a child, I didn't. I mean, I can't speak for another human being in regards to the lens I lived that through is all I can relate to. And all I can say is that she tried the best that she could based on what she had to work with in regards to, it's hard to say this. I definitely want to be careful how I word this, because I see too many times down the road, people make comments when something like they're trying to throw somebody under the bus. And by no means am I trying to do it with my wife. Nobody should be ever dealt with the card of losing a child, and a marriage is almost incidental compared to losing a life. And, marriages don't last a lot of times, through the loss of a child, and certainly lives get lost as well. And in this case, it took my wife. But there are lessons to be learned. There's no question that, and I tell this, Sean, to a lot of people when I speak too, is that I can't tell you how to grieve, but I certainly can tell you how not to grieve. That I know for a fact.
That seems like about the most useful information someone could get. Because I think that the other side of it is far too much of a variable that I don't think you can personally be involved in, right? You don't know me, I don't know you that well. Right. And so we can't really say that. But what I can tell you is that if you put your hand on the oven when it's hot, you're going to burn your hand. That shit's going to happen to you. I don't know I can't tell you how to cook, but I can tell you how to understand the heat, right? So that's really fair, Jeff. That's a great angle. So but that perspective of knowing how not to, is that something that, because of your lens, seeing what your wife dealt with and in conjunction with what you dealt with, or are you solely speaking about your journey and what not to do when you say that?
I think, prior to Seth's death, I'd always been a competitor. I played sports. I was in a investment business where I basically been my own boss. I've always been kind of used to adversity. But when Seth died, I had to present this as an opportunity. I'm a Stoic philosopher, so I really read heavily and I really follow a lot of Stoicism. Ryan Holiday has a great book out there written about Stoicism. There's a lot of Pete Carroll, Nick Saban, Bill Belichick. A lot of coaches out there are Stoic believers. And Stoicism is a really great, in conjunction with my meditation. Those are things that really help me be aware. I talk about in my book, negative emotions and negative habits. And, I think far too often we let negative emotions become more than what they should be. And these are greed, anger, despair, hatred, envy, all the things that we get caught up in. Where in reality, if those are kept in short check, Sean, they can be very beneficial. Envy and greed can actually be an impetus to many, many business ideas. People can say, well, someone did this, I can do it better, So, but the problem is if you hang onto it too long, it can be dangerous. The thing you have to avoid are negative habits. Negative emotions are perfectly fine. It makes us human. Negative habits, drinking, smoking, lying, stealing, having an affair when you're married, all the things that are habit oriented that can sustain a negative lifestyle. Those are the things we need to avoid. I don't think negative emotions. I do see some people out there saying, "Oh, you got to try to avoid negative." No, I don't think so. I think negative emotions is what makes me click.
That's way too Pollyanna for me to be.
Okay,
so you're gonna wake up and just everything in your brain is gonna
love. It's like
candy canes and sugar gumdrops everywhere. Like that's not reasonable. And here's what I tell people all the time. People say to me, Sean, you're so positive. You're so this. You're so full of energy. Yeah, thanks. But I only put out like 20% of what's actually going on in here.
Right.
And that's because you can think whatever the hell you want. But before you say it, you should probably really, really, really be mindful and considerate about what comes out of your mouth, because that can turn into the habit. That can turn into, you can think about if, hey, I like to have a drink. I like to have a drink, but I don't have time for it. Well, that's one thing. But if you're making time to have that drink when maybe you shouldn't, then that's where the habit comes in. So, dude, I totally agree. I don't think there's anything wrong with negative emotions. I think that is. I think that's just setting people up to fail in a social media cancel sort of world where it's like, well, if even the slightest negativity rolls my way, we got to move on.
Right.
That ain't life, dude. That ain't no way.
A lot of what, and if you don't mind, I can talk a little bit about the tour I have coming up next summer.
Please, let's
because
talk.
I think that's going to be something that's just going to be absolutely awe-inspiring. But I've got this little phrase. I got quite a few phrases I like to say. One of them is, you're always free to rewrite your past. You're not obligated to live in your past. So even if there's traumatic things, even if there's things that you keep getting held back, you're not obligated to what happened to you in the past. So trauma, mental health, all these things that people tend to hang on to. These are things I think as I evolve into the next stages of this Living Undeterred project are things I'm going to be talking about. So what we're doing next year, next summer on May 9th, 2022, I'm doing the Living Undeterred US tour. So it's a play on Living Undeterred. I'm going to every state in the United States for 92 days. I even have a website designed for this. I have 15 states already partnerships on this deal. And the goal is to raise $1 million to talk to anybody I can to make it less about me and my story and more about America and Americans and their story. And hopefully in doing so, I can meet people like me that maybe don't have the time, maybe don't have the desire, maybe don't have the whatever. And they see me doing this and they're going, you know what? I'm going to go meet this guy. I want him to tell him about my son who died. And I hope he can continue his legacy by talking about him. And so I've got this tremendous project in mind and I'm super excited to do it. And so I'm going to ask my LinkedIn supporters, my followers, I'm going to ask my Facebook friends, anybody I can that wants to be a part of this to be on board with this. But the objective, Sean, is to change the narrative on mental health, substance abuse, and addiction. So mental health is the umbrella. Substance abuse, addiction, sex abuse, gambling abuse, suicidal ideation, those are spokes to the wheel. And I swear to you, I am going to find a way to raise $1 million. And if I don't raise $1 million, I will. Let's leave it at that.
Look,
that's not an option. That's not an option.
That's what you said. That's what you said you're going to do. That's what you're going to do. Yeah. Hopefully, when you go to Georgia, Patrick Moore has just got his arms open, waiting to bring you in and be your sponsor down there. Really, obviously great. Look, that I love it. I think that anyone who is out talking about changing the narrative around mental health, again, we all have our stories. I think more are more public than others. I think people are, as you said, more people are willing to talk in certain environments where they're not, and if you're basically just out there, Jeff, on tour saying, hey, let's talk about your story. Let's have, group auditorium therapy.
Yeah.
That is something that people wouldn't normally put themselves into. And you may go there, Jeff, and you may find no one raise their hand. And in which you'll have to tell your story. You'll have to be a part of it. But hopefully they will have people who are anxious to just say it and get it out and know that there are other people like them. Like I said, I don't have kids. I've certainly lost people close to me, and I've been through loss. This idea that death is our greatest teacher, my dad has been preparing me for his death almost my whole life. It's the weirdest thing. He's been saying to me his whole life, don't forget about this after I'm gone, or don't forget that when I'm gone. And it's just we've gone to thousands of sporting events together. It's been our lifestyle. We do it. And every time, well, just don't forget these moments when I'm gone. And so finally, he's just turned 75. I said, Dad, we're going to find out soon if this was worth it, because I've been jacking with me my whole life. So I hope it was worth it. And he basically comes back and says almost the same thing, which is, son, if you can't learn from what's happened after I'm gone, then what was the point of me being here? And so I love what you're talking about. Where did you get the idea of the 50 states? Like, how did this sort of come together?
Well, I have ADD, so it's I got to be hyper focused on stuff. I'll be honest with you. It was a Sunday night, and I got off my elliptical, and I was on Twitter, and I saw some dad riding his bike across the state that he was in. I don't know what state it was, but he was raising money for breast cancer awareness for his wife that had breast cancer. And here's this envy or jealousy or my competitiveness. I'm like, well, shit, I can do that. It's like, okay, I've got a child that died. I could raise money for this stuff. And I thought, well, first of all, I don't want to bike and I don't run, and I want to do more. And Iowa's a small state. So I'll just buy an RV and I'll drive around the United States. I went the next day, and by noon, I had a 35-foot RV I purchased.
Nice.
The next day.
Yeah, you gotta work on driving that thing anyways before.
No, I got a driver already going to drive it for me.
I'll kill driver.
Oh, yeah, I'll kill. No, but I tell you what, and again, I'm in a position resource wise where someone asked me the other day, Jeff, what's your budget on this? And my budget is every freaking penny I have. That is my budget. I have no budget. And
you're willing to spend all your money and
every
raise
penny,
and you'll raise less than you spend. It's not a problem for you if it means getting out here and doing this.
Yeah, this is not about money. I've never made a money on anything I've ever done on this project, and I don't intend to at this point. I say at this point because I know there's people chirping in my ear. I need to do all this. I'm just a freaking dad from Iowa, man. That's got this an unbelievable, unshakable passion. I'm not a motivational coach. I'm not a life coach. I've got something burning inside of me that with ADD I can't put out. And funny story too, Sean, I applied for LinkedIn to do a LinkedIn Live, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And this was like 6 months ago, and they said no, which apparently I guess they do everybody. But I thought, okay, you know what? Maybe my story's not compelling enough. Screw you. I'm just going to go see everybody then.
I love it. Dude, my wife and I have talked about it for sure. And then when you come rolling through Wisconsin next summer, I'm going to do my best to be out there waving a flag, because I think the mental health awareness, I think being a part of this whole movement is important to me, and we're hearing more athletes talk about it. We're hearing more people in the bigger arenas talk about it. And I think that's fine and great. But the reality is you can't necessarily, connect there. Right. And so when we talk about mental health from a car guy perspective, like I was mentioning to you in the pre-show, my boy Stephen Whitten and the Men Able group out of the UK, that's a niche to our business, because we know our business in the car business is very, it's very manly, it's very machismo, and it's silly and dumb and rooted in all kinds of nonsense, where we could just say, hey, how are you doing? And what's really going on with you? Because in 100% commission world, as you know, as a financial advisor, no one's paying you a salary, right? And you got to earn the commission.
Right.
It's a tough world. You need the drugs, alcohol, gambling. When you got money, gambling. I used to say I don't gamble. I play money I play cards for money.
Yeah.
Gambling implies that I can't lose what I put forward, and I can lose what I put forward.
Right.
And I think that's why I love the Choices Network.
Yeah.
Because the reality is my choices are mine. You know, I still bust my dad's ball, 75 years old, and he's still, hey, gotta go to the casino. Okay, dude. Like if that's what you do, if that's what makes you happy after being sober, you know, on the alcohol side for almost 40 years, then
you've earned it.
Go play
You've earned it
with $250, you know, and just have at it, dude.
You've earned it. Yeah.
It doesn't matter, right? So, Jeff, man, I really love it. Thank you so much. Please, as everyone knows, this episode will be on LinkedIn. Here we go. That's where we mostly are. But please put the links in the comments, both in the LinkedIn and on the YouTube post, if you could, please. Just connect everybody with everything you're doing, whether it's the Undetoured US tour or just a link to your book. Just blow it up. Put every link to everything Jeff does in this post, because it's important that I think people hear the message.
One thing I'll add there, Sean, when we first started talking, you said something that really hit home. You said that when you talk to people, that everybody has a story, and that when your little petty thing you think is a big deal, and you find out that, hey, this guy lost his son and his wife. Let me tell you about a guy I met early in my journey, Steve Grant, and he's going to be one of my partners in South Carolina. Steve, 18, 20 years ago, lost his only two boys to opioid overdoses, Chris and Kelly, 5 years apart. And this was before it was a household name. And that was his only two boys. That's his last name legacy forever. And, you know, Steve has been a great mentor, a great friend of mine. And he wrote a book called Don't Forget Me. And so there you go. There's an example where how could Jeff Johnston meet somebody that has had a situation more traumatic than what he's been? Well, I still have two boys left, you know?
And that granddaughter, Jeff, I got to tell you, bro, that one's still got the arm hair raised up. It's still, that is just some kismet, unbelievable. I know it's tragic. Please know, I am not taking anything away from the Seth tragedy, but you can see a bit of Seth for as long as this young girl exists in this world, which hopefully is well beyond you. And hopefully
it's hard. It's very difficult. It's hard to get down for very long, Sean, because I think of all the great things I have in my life, all the love, all the care. And you know what? I throw that last week, a couple weekends ago, I threw the biggest pity party I've ever had. I invited all my friends, my negative friends in my head, and I threw this huge pity party, and I freaking hated it. So I kicked him out, and I said, never again. I'm not doing this ever again. I have too many people that love me and I love them, that the few things in my life that have been horrendous, I got to keep them in a box, you know?
That's it. I learned the box theory long time ago. I've been in therapy my whole life. Mine is actually the orange Nike box. The shoes come in, I flip it open, I pop it, I drop it, and I leave it back under my bed. Because at the end of the day, I still have to process it. It doesn't, just because I don't want to think about it or I don't want to deal with it, does not mean that I do not deal with it. But I, like you, my friend, I won't be down for long. I don't get down often, and if I do, it is not in any way long shape. But you find another story, right? You say to yourself, how could life be worse? Stephen Grant. Okay, right. Very good. I'm sure Stephen Grant, unfortunately, probably knows someone on his journey that makes his story worse than theirs, or his. Yep. And so it perpetuates. We all have a story. Jeff, I can't wait for the US tour. I can't wait for people to see this show. Thank you so much for your time and your honesty and just being as real as you have been, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You bet. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. As always, next week on the show, we're gonna have a little bit of fun. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it. I think it'll be a good time. You guys can find Jeff all over LinkedIn and Facebook. And again, all the links to everything he's doing will be in the show. Everybody, thanks a lot for joining, and have yourselves a wonderful week.